President Muhammadu Buhari on Thursday, October 7th, about 12 weeks to the end of the year, presented a proposed 2022 budget to a joint session of the National Assembly. Yes, the proposed total expenditure for the coming year is put at 16.39 trillion naira, with a crude oil benchmark of $57 per barrel and daily oil production estimate of 1.88 million barrels, inclusive of condensates of 300,000 to 400,000 barrels per day, with exchange rate projected at 410 naira 15 kobo per dollar and projected GDP growth rate of 4.2% with 13% inflation rate. The estimated budget, which is titled Budget of Economic Growth and Sustainability, is also the first in Nigeria's history where MDAs were clearly advised on gender-responsive budgeting. Worthy of note is that the total fiscal operations of the federal government is expected to result in a deficit of 6.26 trillion naira, representing a 3.39% of estimates. Estimated GDP is slightly above 3% threshold set by the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007. However, economic experts are of the view that in terms of structure and character, the revenue forecast and budget parameters appear very unrealistic. Well, to help understand better these figures and the proposed 2022 budget, I have joining me live from our Abuja studios this Monday afternoon the Macro-Economic and Public Policy Analyst, an expert indeed, Professor Ken Ife. Good afternoon, Professor Ife, and it's good to see you today.
Oh, welcome. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Yes, Prof, before I go into assumptions and all of this, many times we say the budget has been timely for some time, and when it's timely, many believe that it should be properly implemented. Now, what do you make of the timing before we now go into the details of this document? What benefits do you think we really gain in, making our budget follow the January to December cycle? What are the positives in this?
First, it helps us to spend the most. For example, we expect from what the president said that they're going to completely spend the entire allocation for capital expenditure by the end of this year, which is very good news. The second is that it aligns more with the private sector because that January to December is in tune with private sector, and other states as well. So that alignment is very, very important, so that we are all singing from the same hymn book.
What a good one. But now let's look at the performance of the 2021 budget before we even move into this proposal. Prof, a lot of submissions have followed this, looking at revenue being a major challenge. What are you foreseeing as we move on in 2022? Because this still remains a challenge.
Well, the performance is still, there's still some way to go in the current 2021 performance, but it is not unexpected. And I know that we will finish up stronger before the end of the year. The signs are there, and the revenue, the whole action being taken by government to double the revenue base is actually yielding fruit. And not to talk of some other major policy changes like the execution of the Petroleum Industry Act. So they all portend the future. The future is going to be brighter than what we've seen in the past. And I think actually this budget next year shows us that we can actually expect to see light at the end of the tunnel, and we are gradually moving out of the woods.
All right, moving to now the planned 2022 expenditure, this document, 16.39 trillion naira. Statutory transfer of 768 billion naira. Well, we can go on and on. Capital of 5.35 trillion naira and a debt service of 3.61 trillion naira. Now, Prof, what's your overview of this projection in its entirety?
Well, dollar to dollar, naira to naira, the 2022 budget is superior to 2021 budget and much of what we've had before. If you look at the benchmarks, they are more reliable because the longer term prediction of the oil prices and production volume are very robust. You've seen it $40 against $57, 1.6 million barrels against 1.88. And in fact, in the actual performance to date, we're actually doing 1.7 million barrels a day, higher than what was projected this year. So all of those projections stack up. The inflation might go down as projected, but we have to see it's already trending down for the last few months. Then in terms of the actual spend, the ratios, financial ratios also are superior. If you look at the debt service is lower, and then from the projection this year is 4.68%, is 3.6% this year. The revenue is superior by over 2.2 trillion, rising from 8.12 trillion to 10.32 trillion. So that obviously are due to a continuous rise in the independent revenue over the last few years. And what strikes me about this is this. If you look at the 2016 recession, it was the drop in oil revenue and contribution to GDP and government revenue that dragged us into recession. And we had to stay in recession until the oil prices picked up and then pulled us back out of recession. If you look at last year, it was still the collapse in the oil that pushed us into stagflation. But now, what brought us out was the non-oil revenue. The non-oil revenue is now superior to the oil revenue. So if you look at the disaggregation of the current revenue, you will see that the oil revenue has dropped to about 43%. From 50%, it used to be 55, 50, now it's 43% as per this year's budget. This is very, very significant because if this trend continues, then we are going to experience a much more resilient and robust situation where sudden changes in oil fortunes will not drag us into recession.
Prof, revenue has remained a challenge, and I'm going to look at it. But does it now mean that our efforts and the non-oil taxes increase? Would you say that some of this are paying off? Some are even advising that government need to sell off some infrastructure that are not bringing in profits, or whichever way that we can just make more money from it. Are you thinking that government can make money also along that line? Revenue is what I'm focused on at the moment now to service this document.
No, we're already making more money from revenue. That's what I said about independent revenue. If you notice that in the 2020 Finance Act, there was revenue, there was a cost to revenue pegged at 50%. So it's sending a strong signal to MDAs, the agencies. We don't expect you to spend more than 50% of your revenue. So that's one. The second one is that the Senate is dragging the Fiscal Responsibility Act to be far more active, and then you've now seen that they are more active on the 80% quarterly payment of the operating surplus. And where you are found wanting, they will now clamp down on your source of revenue and take 25% at source. So you've seen those three drives. They're all cumulatively forcing more revenue to the kitty. And then you also heard the President of Senate saying that, well, this 400 billion we got from these agencies, we expect 1 trillion this next year. Well, that is good news, actually. So we are going to see more drive towards those independent revenue. And then as to the FIRS revenue, you also had them at the aftermath of the signing of the Petroleum Industry Act, where the FIRS said that they're expecting over 10 trillion next year in revenue. So they are looking at the revenue doubling because of the restructure, the fundamental restructure of the oil industry. And then at least NNPC is no longer going to be capable of doing, handling the entire revenue the way they do. So they're now going to have to contain with 10% of the proceeds from oil. So there are severe changes going on that have massive implications for government revenue. And of course, there are also leakages that are being plugged, as well as a comprehensive review of the tax waivers, because we believe that those tax waivers, necessary as they may be, but not on this scale, where if you look at illicit transfer and tax waivers, they all are even more than the revenue. So likely to see government tighten the news on that aspect of our leakage.
Now, Prof, worthy of note is the fact that this government has grappled with 2 recessions in just the lifespan of the administration, have been able to come out with growth. What are the projections? What kind of projections do you see with regards to growth as we move on? World Bank has projected 2.4% for the last quarter of the year.
Well, the government has also projected around that 4%, but the thing is that we will finish up higher than the World Bank projection. You know that in the second quarter, the last GDP quarter, we got about 5.1%. And we might not get as much as that 5 in this current quarter, third quarter, but it will be somewhere around 3+. So that will be helpful, and then you expect more growth in December, in the embedded years, months. So hopefully we should be able to finish up somewhere above 3 when you aggregate the whole. That's my expectation.
Now, back to capital and recurrent expenditure. Let's stay with capital. We see a lot of projects the president reeled out: Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, the rail lines, and all of the investments, all made by this administration. Now, what do you make, if we are to side by side with what we had last year, what do you make of our capital expenditure? Do you see us actualizing, finishing most of the projects that we have on ground at the moment?
I think we should be. The reason being that, first of all, is there any of those capital projects that you wouldn't want to see happen? Everybody wants to see them happen. And all these projects were embarked upon before this administration. The difference is that whilst many of the contractors walked away complaining they are not getting paid, this particular administration says, look, I'm not interested in awarding you contract, just go back to site. Whatever I'm able to find, I will pay. And that's exactly what he's been doing. And so there is none of those areas, infrastructure, where you don't have boots on ground, work going on. But the thing is that, are they likely to finish before the administration? I think there's a very high probability that they could. Part of the reason is that they've now set up Infrastructure PLC, and that is already capitalized with 1 trillion, and they're going to market for 15 trillion naira. And then that will come handy because they will be able to offload some of these infrastructure projects. And then obviously, when they raise this money will go to augment the spend on infrastructure. So, and then there are some pipeline of funding still coming that are also going to help. You have bilateral loans with China, and some of those you have multilateral development finance institutions that are comfortable lending to Nigeria, even though everybody seems to be crying foul, but they are comfortable with lending to a resource-rich country that has not defaulted one day on their payment. And then you see, there are other things that we should bear in mind. Look at the scale of the spend on security, 2.5 trillion, all the security agencies put together, about 25% of our government revenue. That is a lot of money. And it's because of the asymmetric warfare going on in the 6 geopolitical zones. The second point to also bear in mind is that all the civil servants, none of them has been shortchanged. They've all been receiving their salaries from the inception of this administration, and their pensions are being paid. And so you haven't seen what we have been seeing before. We were living with people being owed so many months' salaries and even going up to a year. So all these will tell you that there is a determination to hold back on areas of weakness. And then if you look at social inclusion, there's about 500 billion every year that is being spent on social inclusion program. So all of those are going concurrently with the financing the war, and then is tough. Plus all the two recessions we've been into, and the COVID onslaught last year. So all of them have put so much strain on government resources that we need to recognize that.
Now, Prof, would you agree, or some are saying that Nigeria does not have a debt sustainability problem, but it's a revenue challenge that we have? Do you think our debt, can we continue to sustain the debt that we have at the moment, even adding more to it?
I've always said yes, because just look at this population growing at 2.8% or 3%. You cannot stand still. There's no way. If you stand still, the poverty will worsen, unemployment will go through the roof. It's already through the roof already, but it will hit the sky. Then the other thing to bear in mind is that the kind of challenges we are facing are existential problems. Security that we are facing is existential. If you do nothing, then you could be overrun, like Afghanistan, by contending forces. Then this COVID you had last year and even up till now are existential problem. People are dying. You can't say I'm not going to borrow money to spend. Are you going to worship money? If you don't have, if you need to invest and you don't have savings, which we don't have, then you're going to have to borrow. The issue will now be, are you borrowing within the limits of the law? And the answer is yes, because they comply with the 2007 Act on fiscal responsibility. They are borrowing for the purpose of capital expenditure and human resource development. And look at the budget now. The education is about 8%, and then health is about 7%. So there's huge investment going out on social inclusion. And then you see on employment, we haven't got the good employment figures from 33% overall employment to over 50% for young people. But there is a lot of money going out there. If a youth investment fund, it takes time. And there were 774 local government projects and all that stuff. So but it takes time, but there is energy going in there. And don't forget that Nigeria, there are 42 million MSMEs in Nigeria compared to 90 million in Africa. So Nigeria is almost half of Africa MSMEs, which is entrepreneurship. It tells you that entrepreneurship is really a great advantage for Nigeria. And don't forget that we are also growing our businesses. The tech hubs are #1 in Nigeria, #1, both in terms of the numbers and also in terms of in private equity capital coming into the tech hubs, innovation hubs. And so all of you got to reckon with this and see what technology is doing in our life, transforming the economy and diversifying the economy. So those are things that we have to bear in mind.
Prof, wrapping up now, like many will say, we always have good documents, but implementation remains very important, particularly at this time. Prof, I'm thinking a little bit backwards as we wrap up this discussion. We had the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, beautiful document before now. Then we moved up to the Economic Sustainability Plan regards to COVID-19 and all that we've seen, trying to help alleviate all of the sufferings that Nigerians have faced. Now, do you think all of these documents are in sync with our appropriation plan as we move on year in, year out?
I think they are. If you notice, when the recession came in 2016, there was so much confusion in the land. And it was actually the CBN that stood up to face the challenge, and even through all the measures, and eventually ended up in forex demand management. The thing is that the development partners said they can't come in until we have a plan. So that was when the growth plan was produced, and then everybody was involved and had some marching orders, and we quickly got out of recession, and their help started coming. Now, in the same way, we had COVID. Then we have economic sustainability plan. So while that was being worked, already the CBN has moved forward to put 3.5 trillion on the table. And that sustainability plan came with 2.3 trillion. And together, they fought the recession like never seen before. And that was why it lasted only 1 quarter. There was quantitative fiscal and monetary policy response. Different, I didn't see any other African country that came to the scale that Nigeria came to, and will quickly within a quarter jumped out of recession. Many countries are still in recession for over a year, but we got out within a quarter. That meant we spent so much money. In fact, don't forget, if you listen to the speech of the minister in March last year, she said that the knock-on effect will be 60% reduction on the revenue and the budgeted revenue. Yes, that was it. But then, with all the efforts and spend, we ended up overspending the even budget by the end of the year, 2020. So the answer to your question is that the debt that we are seeing is sustainable, because the action on the revenue is to double the overall revenue. And when you double it, you have the potential impact. We've seen that in real term, the budget for the debt service is dropping. This year, it was dropping. In fact, last year, it ended about 83%. This year, the budget was 46.8%, And next year, the budget was 36%. So which brings it down, it's coming down below international benchmark of 40%. Then you look at the fiscal deficit is also coming down to 3.6, just a little bit above our 3%, but then they're shifting that anyway to 4% in the revision going on. So there is a movement in the positive direction. Inflation is also trending down, and it's a very tough time, but the country is fighting. We are fighting. This time we're actually better than 2016 because you have massive handshake between the fiscal and monetary policy authorities. And that's what we're benefiting from.
I must thank you so much. We must leave it at that. Chief Economic Strategist, ECOWAS, World Bank. We can go on and on. Professor Kenny Faye, there analyzing, letting us understand this document, the 2020 proposed budget submitted by President Buhari. Macroeconomic and Public Policy Analyst, Professor Kenny Faye. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. My pleasure.
Oh.